Welcome back, everybody, to Inside Texas Basketball. I'm your host, Evan Feith, joined as always by Keenan Womack. Keenan, how you doing today?
I'm good, man. Big time commitment yesterday, and we'll get to it. But big first step for Sean Miller.
Yeah, a lot going on, and our Inside Texas readers heard about that commitment pretty quickly. As a part of the spring practice sale, Inside Texas is now $1 for 4 months. Join the Inside Texas family today. It's not just a site where you can find the best news about spring practice, injuries going on aplenty for Texas football. Also, a place to read all about Keenan's insider information on the basketball team who might be coming through the portal. I'm doing a lot of baseball work with Nash Talks Texas. Right now, Inside Texas is the best place to go for anything Texas sports related. So go on over, check it out, and get this $1 for 4 month deal. I don't know if you're getting anything better than that anywhere for any team out in college sports. So Inside Texas is your place to be right now. And speaking of that, which we'll get to later in the episode, we're first just going to shout out the women's basketball team. We're a predominantly men's basketball channel, but the women's basketball team making their first Final Four in, I believe, 22 years after a win versus TCU. We'll talk a little bit about it this episode, but just congratulations to Vic Schaefer, Madison Booker, Rory Harmon, that whole team and staff. A great win. And Keenan, as you said, heading into this episode, Dalen Swain was the big commitment that we were talking about. Huge get from Xavier. What's kind of the scouting report on him? What should fans know about him outside of just the box scores that you see?
Yeah, so what's great about Dalen Swain is he's absolutely a two-way type of player. He's a very good perimeter defender. He's big. He's like 6'8", I think 220. I don't have the number in front of me, but I believe it's something like that. So he's built enough to be switchable defensively, right? Like he can play against wings and guards in some. I mean, there's certain guards that'll be too quick for him, but for the most part, he'll be able to guard guards. And opposing wings, he'll be able to take, and some opposing power forwards too, because of his size, because of his 6'8" frame. He'll be able to switch between guarding guys on the perimeter and guarding guys in the post. So he's a huge defensive piece to start. But secondly, he's a very good driver, and he has a very good handle for his size. That's the other thing about Dalen Swain that I think kind of separates him from your typical defensive wing archetypes. He's not a shooter, right? He doesn't shoot well from three. I think he shot 25% this year. Yep. Though he did have a very, very awesome game against Illinois where he hit 3 of 5 and scored 27 points. So he or 26, something like that. So that was kind of his game where he showed like, oh, this guy can actually be a scorer as well. I mean, he averaged 11 points per game on the season, 5.5 rebounds, believe 2.5 assists as well, which is really nice for a college player, especially for a guy that didn't have a crazy usage rate, considering how much, other guys on that team like Ryan Conwell had the ball in their hands. He didn't have a massive usage rate. To have an assist rate as high as his with that usage rate is very impressive to me. Again, he's very athletic. This is a guy who, I talked to some NBA scouts about him, and they really like the two-way upside. They think he's a guy that next summer can be an NBA draft pick. They think he's a guy that'll probably play 1 year at Texas before going and playing in the NBA. And we've seen this kind of archetype pop off in the NBA as these switchable wings that can defend both opposing small forwards and power forwards. Very important in the way the NBA operates now, where it's all threes and drives. I think this is an awesome pickup. I think it's one of the most important pickups they could have made because they needed somebody to anchor the perimeter defense, and they have a guy that can do that now. They also have a guy with a burgeoning offensive game who's starting to develop as a scorer.
Yeah, and I think, one of my most the phrase I just dislike the most when people talk about NBA players specifically is guarding 1 through 5, the ability to do that. Because how many players can really do that? Like, ever players to do that?
5 or 6 ever.
So this guy's not Bill Russell, obviously, and but Swain really, like you said, apart from maybe the quicker point guards, your Zakai Zieglers and the true centers, he's really going to be able to at least hold his own against down low power forwards, some perimeter or most perimeter scores you're going to find against Texas. So that's why this edition is so good, because you usually can't find these. He's not quite an anchor, that's not the word, but these defensive specialists that also can like two-way play and have an impact on the drives. The driving kicks, I think those 2.5 assists are actually probably the most underrated part about his game. It's his ability to get down low, but also find a shooter in the corner, which sometimes you wouldn't see that from the Texas basketball players that would drive. So like 2.5 assists would almost be leading on Texas, and under 20% usage, hitting that number, like you said, is a really good spot. For me, this makes the loss of Devon Pryor a lot less of a concern for me. I don't think there would a spot for him on the team anyway, because you can't hold too many non-shooters on a roster. If you're going to run an 8-man rotation, having 4 more that can't shoot would be pretty poor. And you're hoping that Kendall Weaver is going to come back. That seems very likely. I'm not sure if anything's confirmed yet. And then it's unlikely you're going to get a center with true stretchability. So those two, and then Swain as your kind of non-shooters on the team, surround the rest of them with guys that can hit threes. I think that's a good formula, and we'll talk a little bit about portal strategy more coming up. But Swain, coming over from Xavier, does have 2 years of eligibility, NBA potential, like you said, as well as, the trust coming in that he would come over to Sean Miller seemed pretty high. There were reports of him going to maybe Ohio State, that he'd have to pluck him out of Columbus. That's where he grew up. But just a big get for Sean Miller and his staff. And where do you see Miller heading for the rest of this portal season? What are the strategies going to be? Obviously, maybe miss on Ryan Conwell, who ended up at Louisville somehow. We thought it was going to be Indiana. But where do you think Miller's looking next? What's the next most important? Is it getting guys to come back, or is it finding his dudes in the portal?
Well, first of all, on Conwell, Louisville came in with a very big offer. That's kind of why that went down. And Louisville is going all in. So not totally surprised. That backcourt is going to be outrageous next year. It's going to be very good. With Mikal Brown Jr. coming in, and with the kid from Adrian Woolley from Kennesaw State, I believe. Either way, yeah, one of those schools. Either way, so the portal strategy is interesting, right? Like, some of these guys are going after Magoon Guath, going back to San Diego State after people reported he might end up at Kentucky. He's going home. Dalen Swain committed. Conwell committed to Louisville. There's some other guys I wrote about. Clearly, one of the things that they want in the portal is a defensive big, one with some range or some size or some mobility or a combination of the three. Some of the bigs they're looking at, they're all like 7-footers, right, who are mobile, and a lot of them are guys that can, score off the block, right? So last year at Xavier, they ran a pretty high amount of post-ups. And I think part of that is because Zach Freemantle was such a big part of their offense, right? Like, they were like very high up in the nation in post-up rate. I was looking on through my stats yesterday that I had, and I don't know that they're going to go to that many post-ups this year, just because they're not going to run the offense probably through their post. But it is very interesting to see their strategy as far as some of the bigs, like the kid from Arizona, Vesar. I always forget how to pronounce his name. Either way, he's very interesting because he's a guy that can, he can pass out of the short roll. He can score inside. He's very mobile. He's very big. But all of the bigs they're going after are very mobile guys, right? They're rim running type of bigs. Like Harlan Obioha is the same kind of big. He's not quite as much of a mobile big because he's 280 pounds. He's very nimble for his size. You can move around, and he can post up as well. So it's kind of obvious the kind of bigs that Sean Miller is going for. And, they're typically, post control, defensive deterrent type of bigs. But if you can get somebody like Arizona's transfer, if you can get somebody like Obioha, who has a little bit of extra something on the offensive end, either they can short roll pass, they can spot up, they can pick and pop, like whatever that ability may be, it helps your offense a lot to have that versatility on the offensive end in the post. And you can have a post kind of hub, sort of like how the Rockets use Alperen Şengün or the Kings use Domantas Sabonis.
Or even, you see Auburn getting Janai Broom out there on the high screens. It's like their guards are going to be more talented than most teams in the league. But, are you going to play drop and let them shoot right over you with Denver Jones, or are you going to let Broom, dismantle you from the top with his passing ability? And we've talked about it before in past episodes, that when you're building a roster and you're finding that center in the portal, which hasn't been a thing that Texas has succeeded with in the past 3 years. Dylan DC was a great get from Vanderbilt, but since then, the Caden Shedrick experience was probably not the most positive one in most fans' eyes. But I think the base is you want size and rebounding. Like at that point, that should be a no brainer. But then you have to prioritize something. You're not going to get everything. You're not going to get a true elite rim protector. Those maybe are the guys that come from high school, or you're not going to get a true shooter. But like you said, if the posting up and the offensive hubness from down low is not what's going to happen, like they have with Fremantle, which that's less of recruiting and more of he just stayed on the team and was a good player for them. I think a rim protector is where you'd like to go, and someone that can just be an anchor down low and work with Swain, work with Weaver, and make Texas have a better defense than you might expect a Sean Miller team to have. Because there's going to be good offenses in the SEC. I think another spot that I think they're prioritizing a lot, and I've seen from the rumored who's visiting, who's been contacted to, is a real elite scorer, a true high level G5 scorer, and maybe even lower than G5. G5 might be a little bit too nice to say where these guys are coming from, but we've talked about Jakari White maybe potentially being a guy that comes in. I know they've reached out to Jacksonville State guard Jaron Pierre Jr. Pierre was the CUSA Player of the Year last year, a 20-point per game guy. White, super athletic, can shoot, can score from anywhere. And these guys that come up from these smaller schools, it's not like in football where you're asking a kid from Jacksonville State to go play your wide receiver one position. Dalton Connect and Chaz Lanier were two really low-level teams, came into Tennessee and were leading scorers, had some of the best seasons in the team's history. So I think Miller's going to see these guys as, hey, we're not going to have Trey Johnson back. We're not going to get a top 10 recruit in this class, but we can have people who have already hit the floor in college basketball, already shown their scoring prowess, and we can mold them with the high pace and high intensity that we run on offense to become high-level scorers.
Yeah, I totally agree with the premise that Sean Miller is kind of, he is one of the things I praised Texas Tech for this year and their basketball team, which I predicted to go to the Final Four. They obviously lost a close one to Florida. But the thing that they do so well is they have fantastic role definition on the offensive end. I've said this before. That's something that Sean Miller seems to be pretty big on, right? And these guys knowing what they're supposed to do every trip down the floor, it may sound like that's the most obvious thing in the world, but it gets lost in the mix. Just the simple, what do they default to after the first set, after the second play? What do they default to? And that's really important. And having guys that can kind of freelance, like a Jakari White, like having guys that can kind of freelance, like a Kennard Davis Jr. from Southern Illinois. If you have guys that can kind of do that, you can bail yourself out of some of these situations. Now, obviously, the ideal possession, your set works or your play works. But if it doesn't, which it's college basketball, like things are going to happen. Maybe the opponent switches to a hedge in between your possessions, and you get a different look defensively, and you have to change things up, and you have to freelance. Having guys that can do that, super important, and I don't know that Texas particularly had a guy outside of Trey Johnson last year that was able to do that very well. And, and typically your freelance guy is a point guard because it's somebody who can distribute and facilitate on top of scoring. And Trey had to do it really without being a point guard. He was a wing, kind of. He's a guy that got much better at passing, whose reads improved drastically over the course of the year, but not a point guard. So they're looking for kind of lead guards that can score, because that is the kind of guard that can bail you out of a situation when your sets don't work and you have to kind of scramble on offense. When you have a guy that's able to do that, you kind of help yourself out in a lot of situations on the offensive end.
Well, when you talked about that free flowingness and guys doing their job, but maybe not as much set structure, probably gave some Texas fans a bit of PTSD from Rodney Terry's offensive sets, because that was a big problem for a lot of fans, is how the team operated in the half court. And I think with a true point guard, say you got Pierre from Jacksonville State, that's a 4 assists a game guy that maybe even goes up if he's got a better group of talent around him. It's just a good thing to have on your roster, to be able to. The bailing out isn't the word I would say, but teams throw stuff at you that you don't expect. Maybe you find a zone on a possession you weren't expecting it on, or you're getting pressed a little harder. That's when your first read on a set, your wing swing out and try to get a basket off that doesn't go in. having a true facilitator that can run a pick and roll and get you a 3 second left of the clock, three in the corner. That's so important for a team to have. And like you said, I don't think Mark did well at the end of the year, but I don't think Pope ever got you that. I don't think I don't still think any part of like Julian Larry's game was quite at that level. So there's gonna be a lot of new. Pope and Mark could be back, and we already have confirmation that Nick Cody is coming back. We think Weaver is going to come back. Are there any other takes on this roster for you that are coming back to Texas that haven't officially hit the portal yet, or obviously still talking with Sean Miller? Are there any other players that you'd like to see return to this team?
I mean, the obvious one is Weaver, and it looks good from that perspective.
Yeah.
He seems to be, whatever. I'm sure a report will come out soon about that, but it does look good from Texas perspective with him. He is the main guy I think you got to bring back. Obviously, Cody's coming back as well. You got to retain some of these high school commitments, which I have heard they are going to with John Clark. And yeah. And, he is the type of guy who Sean Miller is, who can build an offense out based on guard play. And that's why he's going for some of these centers. Like a guy like the Arizona center Vasar would be amazing because of his ability to short roll pass. Now, he doesn't have a ton of assists a game, just 1.5, but he's a very versatile offensive big. And I think that's super important when you're putting together a roster. Now, you don't have to have it, but it can completely open up things out of the post with the perimeter. It's just really nice. I mean, you watch some of these offenses in the NBA that are ran from the post, like Denver, like Sacramento, like Houston, and even Derek Queen did that to an extent at Maryland this year. As far as like kind of being the hub on the offensive end, even though he's playing mostly on the block. I really like the portal strategy right now. I think it is the way that they're going to have to compete in the SEC because they have a decent budget. They do not have the highest budget in the SEC. Yeah. And you have to find guys that fit together. That's why, you look at the Conwell thing. I'm not going to drop the price, but it was he got a bag, right? And I think as good as he is, I don't think that's the biggest loss in the world because I think that money might be able to be allocated in a different way that might be more beneficial to this team.
Yeah, and I think Texas fans do need to, temper their expectations a bit on the budget that this team is going to have. They're not going to outbid and get a 5-star recruit out of nowhere like they do with Justice Terry in football because of their NIL money. But I disliked the argument this last season that there's just no budget and no coach would have a budget. They're still going to compete in the SEC to get these players, and you're going to see some transfers that are really good come in. It's not going to happen immediately. None of these teams have a full roster yet. You're still waiting for guys to come in, and some teams will work faster than others, and some players are just waiting to go into the portal once the tournament's over. But we talked about Weaver. Nick Cody is coming back. I would like to see Jordan Pope come back. I think it's someone I've kind of come around on as your first bench option. Him and Weaver off the bench is kind of my optimal roster construction if you're bringing on this team. And even if Nick Cody then is your 8th guy and you're expecting a bigger jump from him under this Miller offense, that's an all right bench for me. Maybe you want one other person in case, the Cody experiment isn't perfect. You need one other big just to have for depth. But I like Jordan Pope when he's going in that score first role and he's taking those kind of less efficient, but they're good for him. Those pull-up jumpers off the jump. And he wasn't a great catch and shooter. Maybe that's something they can work on this year, but having him be the next ball handler off the bench, I'm completely fine with that. I think that would be good, but I would prefer if none of these guys that are on the roster right now are starting next year. I would like a completely new starting 5. I think just Miller kind of glossing it over and saying, hey, this was Rodney Terry's team. We only need 5 dudes. We only need 4 now with Swain. I'm going to get my center. I'm going to get my 3 guards after that. Maybe it's more of a big wing instead of a guard, but we're going to surround Swain, a center, with shooters and a point guard. And I think getting good shooters is going to be so imperative to this role. Anything else about the portal strategy we haven't brought up? Anything you're hearing about, seeing that you might want to bring up?
Yeah, my only concern with Jordan Pope is that he really struggled to get around defenders off the dribble. Mm-hmm. Like he struggled with SEC athleticism and physicality. Now, that's not to say he can't be like a decent player off the bench. I just think you have to think about that if you're Sean Miller, as in, how many of these guys can we afford that can't beat somebody off the dribble? Also, with signing Swain, you can't really play Weaver and Swain at the same time. Should Weaver recommit to, come back, can't really play those guys at the same time. So I think you'd have to have him as a bench player. But I think he would embrace that. I think he's the type of guy that is willing to do really whatever the team needs from him, and that's probably one of his best attributes as a player, is that he's very much a guy that doesn't have a lot of ego and will do the dirty work. We'll dive for the rebound. We'll come off the bench. We'll defend, those kind of things. So, yeah, you definitely want a guy like that on your team as well. So I like the portal strategy. I think it makes sense for what he's trying to do on the offensive end, which is get to the rim for the most part and get clean looks if you're shooting from three and don't take a bunch of middies. I think these players make a lot of sense in this system.
Yeah, Texas is going to revolutionize a little bit, maybe towards the more modern game, the more what Florida's doing, or even the NBA teams are doing. And as we transition into that, we don't have a lot of confirmed news about Texas basketball outside of Sean Miller is the head coach. Swain is coming in. But we have heard about the staff and what's going to be happening here. As John Rothstein reported, I think right at the end of March, March 31st, let's tweet. Chris Ogden retaining as the general manager here in Texas. Kind of that idea, which we reported before on Inside Texas, that Miller wants to bring in his guys from Xavier, but also wants a bit of a transition group, guys who are already in Austin, know the team, know the facilities, things of that nature. So Ogden returning as general manager. 3 assistant coaches will be Adam Cohen, David Miller, and Ryan Anderson, who are all on Miller's staff, already worked with him as assistant coaches. And then Ryan Reynolds, director of basketball operations, behind the scenes guy. Ogden, we're familiar with. He was there, when Rick Barnes was there. He was a player on the team. Been in the Texas program for ages. Like you don't know about Texas basketball if you don't know about Chris Ogden. So that's a guy that I expected to return. It seemed like he was just wanted to stay in Texas no matter who the coach was. So important to get your general manager back, not having to do another search. But these other guys that Texas fans might not know about, I know you have some opinions on Adam Cohen, but what do we know about them? What are you looking forward to with this group?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think it's important to retain Ogden in a sense because you need some level of continuity, I feel like. Now, college basketball is not about continuity these days, obviously, right? Like, the roster overturned. You look at some of the teams that overturn. I mean, you look at Louisville's roster from last year, this year. You look at Michigan's team from last year, this year. You look at, Maryland. Like, there's so many teams that just filled in all their holes. Kentucky, you know what I mean? Who filled in all these extra holes with really talented transfers, and were able to do that. As far as these hires, Adam Cohen is a very good recruiter. He has a very good reputation as far as that goes. And then as for the other guys, I think it's important to have some strain of the new coaching staff and some strain of the old come in, because you need somebody to be the liaison kind of between the AD and the new coaching staff. I feel like that's helpful to have somebody who has a long-standing relationship already with the athletic director in Ogden. And yeah, I mean, it's not a super surprising development how many of his guys he brought over, but I think it makes sense. And I think, look, I said from the beginning I like this hire. I think it's a good hire. I think Sean Miller knows what the hell he's doing. I've seen him get to several Elite Eights. I've seen him win conference championships. Like, this is a guy that knows how to build out a staff, how to work a system. He's also a guy that's adapted so much over the years. Like, he was a defensive-minded guy for a long time. And now he's this kind of, like, offensive, like, get into transition type of guy. Now, they don't have, like, the fastest pace in the country or anything, but they are more up-tempo, and they do love transition. So it is interesting, and I think encouraging to know that he went from a guy who he adapted over time and went from a guy who was a defensive type of mind into somebody who is more offensive minded and fitting more in with the modern basketball world.
Yeah, and you can also see kind of an archetype idea with these 3 assistants. Cohen being that really good recruiter is why they've gotten guys to come into Xavier who maybe wouldn't kind of kept a hold of that Midwest area. But then David Miller, who in our article mentioned no relation to Sean, is one of these guys behind the scenes, is apparently very beloved and is very acknowledged by the people who work with him because of his modernity, I guess would be the word. Basketball analytics. He recruits well on campus, so he's going to be a big part of it. And then Anderson played college basketball with Sean Miller at Arizona, so just guy who's close with him, has the kind of on the ground younger dude. Played in 2016, so he's a young guy. So it just seems like the staff hires all meshed together. It's why they were on the staff originally in Xavier. Like you said, the liaison role with Ogden. It seems like Miller's already done stuff that CDC likes because he's given him the hiring and he's kept the guys on that CDC's trusted for a while. So a big coaching staff here that I think will be a successful one here in Austin. Like you said, you're pretty bullish on Miller. I'm a big fan of the hire as well, and another thing we're a big fan of here at Inside Texas is Luxe.
This video is brought to you by Luxe Kitchen and Bath. Luxe has been offering high-end kitchen and bathroom remodels for 3 generations throughout the greater Austin area. With 5-star review after 5-star review on Google and Facebook, and an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau, you can put your faith in Luxe Kitchen and Bath's award-winning designers and skilled craftspeople to bring to life that dream vision of your special home. But that's not all. Luxe's all-star team provides full remodels, large additions, and even commercial build-outs as well. So call Luxe Kitchen and Bath at 833-358-LUXE today. Or visit luxekitchenbath.com to discover where quality meets luxury and begin the process of transforming your home. Get a free quote today by calling 833-358-LUXE. That's LUXE. Or by visiting luxekitchenbath.com. Link in the description.
And of course, as we mentioned earlier in the show, Texas women's basketball, as we transition over to that, Keenan, what a run it's been this year for Vic Schaefer's team. You knew the roots of this team were going to be very talented coming into the season. Madison Booker, a potential player of the year candidate, Rory Harmon, the veteran, coming back fully healthy, Taylor Jones returning, so many great things. But I just don't know if it felt like it would actually happen until it has. This team, Elite 8 win over TCU, who was kind of a surprise to get there, but a really good team, great coaching. Haley Van Lith is a premier scorer. Sedona Prince, no matter how you feel about her, 7th-year players are always hard to deal with. So how much did you watch this game, and what did you like from what you saw of this women's basketball team?
Yeah, I've watched the whole run, the whole tournament. I do enjoy the strategy involved in women's basketball because it's not as easy as an automatic shot at the rim. It's tougher to score at the rim than it is to in men's basketball because you don't have the ability to just dunk it. Like you gotta get it in somehow. So I find women's basketball fascinating from an X's and O's standpoint. Vic Schaefer's defense is suffocating. I mean, that hedge is unbelievably tough, right? It's really hard to reverse the ball around the perimeter. It's really hard to set dribble handoffs because they're hedging everything. So it's like really difficult to score. I mean, they just suffocate. They're kind of like the women's version of UH almost. Like not offensively, but defensively. Offensively, they're completely different. But defensively, it's not the same system, right? Like Houston traps post touches and they trap ball screens, and then Texas kind of hedges a lot. But just the ferocity, man, and just you feeling like you're trapped by a boa constrictor when you're playing that defense. I mean, it tightens. It just gets harder to score as the game goes on because you're getting more tired. I mean, it is really impressive to watch that team play defense. And I mean, the conditioning has to be crazy because if you look at like the Houston Cougars, and I always make this comparison, but if you look at the UH Cougars this year, like the average mile on that team, they run a 5:17 mile.
I saw that.
Unbelievable, right? Like the women have to be, the women have to be like the female equivalent of that number because they play so hard the whole game defensively. I mean, they're just all over. They're so mobile. They're so disruptive. I hope they win it all. I think it'd be really cool. I think it'd be really good look for this athletic department. I think it'd be a good look for Vic Schaefer, and I think they have a chance to. Let me see. They played South Carolina 3 times this year and won once and lost twice. So, it's your chance to even that up as well as, advance to the national championship. So I'm really excited for this game coming up. And I think they have a very good shot to be national champions this year. And they would deserve it. They've played very well over the last couple of years.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, how can you not root for Rory Harmon after what's
Oh
going to
yeah,
happen in her career, the injuries, and then also Madison Booker is just one of the best women's basketball players I've seen. You know, at least a team of mine that I've
yeah.
supported. She's just so fantastic as a scorer, so much energy. This team has so much culture running through it. Like the freshmen on the sidelines, you're seeing TikTok edits of those
Oh
girls
yeah.
doing dances out there. It just feels like everybody wanted them to win that game as the ones, even though they were favored as the one seed now. You know, it wasn't quite a full chalk women's basketball bracket, which is funnier that it's less chalk on the men's. UConn did beat
Right.
USC. So it's UConn, UCLA on one side, and then Texas, South Carolina, which probably not what Texas fans were hoping for. That's a tough matchup. Don Staley is such a damn good coach.
She's so good.
But Texas has beaten them this year, which is, you know, an important part of the formula. It's obviously going to be a big game from Booker. Like you said, the defense is going to have to be super staunch there. But I think this Texas team really has the legs to at least win this game, you know. And once you beat South Carolina, it's kind of like, who can't we beat? You know, Paige Beckers, who's that? So this women's team is just been so inspirational for this athletic program. They're going to continue doing what they're doing, not just this year, but for the rest of the time that Vic Schaefer's under them. I think this is just going to continue to be one of the premier programs in the school. But another national championship for this athletic program after men's swim and dive did it on Monday. Would be awesome. You'd love to see it. So, any other thoughts on those women's basketball team as we wrap it up, Keenan?
No, I'm just looking forward to watching them play, and that defense is just fantastic to watch.
Yeah, definitely. So, you know, a little bit of women's today, some men's at the portal. We'll hear a lot more about the portal. I assume next week you're going to hear a lot more commitments and a lot more news coming out. So make sure you stay locked in on Inside Texas. That $1 for 4 months sale still going, hasn't dropped since the 30 minutes that the show has been going on. So much news to come from baseball, basketball, football, women's basketball as well. All the sports here at the University of Texas that you'd want to read about. Inside Texas has a great team of readers and a great team on the Inside Texas YouTube channel, locking in all what's going on in Texas sports. So make sure you're going over there and subscribing. It's a great deal. Keenan, it's been a great show, man. Good to see you next week for hopefully some more portal news. And as always, I've been your host, Evan Beath, joined by Keenan Womack. Thank you. Goodbye.